I want to concentrate on the broadband firstly. So the government recently signed the contract with Granahan and McCourt for the rolling out of the broadband plan, the most costly capital project in the history of the state. Now, as you know, there was two ownership papers that were produced by PwC and KPMG in 2015 that formed the basis of the government decision to pursue a gap funding model, a privatisation model. That means that the private sector will finance, design, build and operate and own the infrastructure, with the state giving the subsidy. Now, this was chosen over the four other options, including state financing and ownership, which we in Sinn Féin have long advocated. And as we predicted, all of the bidders fell out of the bidding process except Granahan and McCourt, wiping away the only stated advantage of the gap funding model, which was competition. As a result, the taxpayer will be subsidising Granahan and McCourt by up to $3 billion, with the private operator contributing over only $220 million in the initial funding through working capital and equity. Now, in your own words, you wrote, "I note that by 2028, the private operator will have all of their monies paid back through dividends and interest, while the Exchequer could have paid out almost $2.5 billion. And again, to quote your letter to the Minister for Communication, Climate Action and Environment, which was dated the 16th of April 2019, you wrote that the contract was a major leap of faith, which represents a major subsidy from the taxpayer for private benefits. And again, regarding the final cost-benefit analysis, you concluded that your department do not believe that this CBA justifies the use of scarce public funds on this scale. And regarding the risks borne by the state and the private bidder, you again wrote that there are unprecedented risks to the Exchequer posed by this proposed project in terms of new technological advantages that, as you put it yourself, could result in a stranded, obsolete asset, despite Exchequer investment of up to $2.275 billion by 2026 in an asset that we will not even own. Again, to quote yourself, I would question whether the further risk associated with guaranteeing service provision over 25 years is genuinely transferred to the private operator or in reality actually retained by the Exchequer. And again, you wrote, in effect, the private operator is being insulated from the project while being afforded a massive upside potential in terms of excess profitability. I wish to re-emphasise one further time this department's fundamental concerns in relation to the unprecedented risks that the state has been asked to bear in the event that the current NBP contract is recommended for approval by government. And in conclusion, you write, I find it difficult to see how such a contract represents value for money for the state or is in the best interest of the taxpayer. And in a reply to a parliamentary question received by my own colleague Jonathan O'Brien TD on the 21st of May 2019, it was confirmed that after 12 months of full deployment by as early as October 2028, Granahan and McCourt can asset strip, flip and sell on the infrastructure that was predominantly funded through the taxpayer subsidy. Now, the question is, has your view on the government's national broadband plan changed? I agree with a lot of what you have said, obviously, but has your view changed on that?
So, well, first of all, Senator, apologies for the paper not being circulated. That's my own fault. I was doing interviews all day yesterday, so I only cleared it last night.
And we will get someone to help you.
No, somebody did help. Lots of people helped me, but I had to clear it. In relation to the broadband plan, so it's my job to give my advice. That's what I'm paid to do, and it's ultimately the job of the minister and the Taoiseach, the cabinet, to accept that advice or not to accept the advice, because they're elected. They're the people who got elected. So I did my job, and the government did their job, and they made a decision. It's now government policy. Decision has been taken, so I have nothing further to add on the matter. I gave my views, which is my job to give my views, and that's what I understand we want from civil service now.
Yes.
There's a lot of criticism of the past before the crash that civil servants didn't stand up, didn't do their job, that there was groupthink throughout the system. I believe that we have, over the last number of years, developed much more of a culture of challenge, of engagement, and that's certainly what Minister Donoghue wants. That's certainly what the Taoiseach, Leo Varadkar, wants. He wants the civil servants who serve the government and the public interest to give their views, and that's what I did. The government made a decision and they've signed the contract, and that project is now proceeding. And
nothing has happened since then to change your view. So I'll take it that your view, as was stated, is the same as it was before. Well, look,
once I stated my views, I've nothing further to add. I'm not precluded to comment on government policy. I'm there to give advice, and that's what I did. The government have made a decision. That's the decision that they take. They're the elected government of the country.
I do think it's disgraceful that that all of your observations and your repeated observations around the value for money factor, and this is then totally dismissed. You would have to ask, what's the point in having senior civil servants with an expertise to advise you on these things, when then you go and you ignore that advice. And so,
well, if you extend that, Senator, then there's no point in having a government let the civil service run the country. If you extend the logic of what you just said, well then, in effect, don't have any politicians.
But just to, the facts,
Ireland,
but the facts.
I'm not being facetious, but that's the logical extension of what you're saying.
No, it is. But to have something so blatantly and so repeated so many times, to have it repeated in terms of the potential asset stripping and how bad this is for the state and for a government to just go ahead and not take any of your advice in it and just continue along the pathway. I think this won't be the last time that your quotes will be read out. I think in years to come, in terms of us examining the value for money there, I think it's atrocious. But I think it's important to put it on record, the government's dismissal of your advice around the whole broadband project.